Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Human Echoes podcast, the show where we review oddball movies, have oddball discussions, and occasionally take questions from you, the oddball fans.
I'm Tony Southcott.
And I'm Albert Berg, and the movie for this week is a little bit of a departure from the oddball realm. Very famous film from 2006 from a very famous director, Christopher Nolan. We're talking about The Prestige.
I'd still consider it to be a little bit of an oddball movie just because it is one of those that, like, it's got a lot going on and it takes multiple watch-throughs to really pick up on everything.
Oh, and there's, I mean, the structure of it's not, like, unbearably weird, but there's a bunch of jumping around in time. There's
146 time cuts, according to IMDb. So it's all over the place.
You know, the guy who sat there with his little checkbox and counted that, do you think he had like one of those little clicker things? Because you can buy them. I have downloaded an app for my phone because one of the guys who speaks at our church says every like 2 or 3 minutes he uses the phrase "I'm just saying."
And you just had to know how many times?
Well, the thing is, he lulls. I'm also not a big fan of the rest of his speaking style either. He kind of lulls me into like a really bad, not a false, like just this almost half asleep, barely able to pay attention kind of thing. So that by the time I think to click on the thing, I've like, did I miss one? Because I've just sort of like glazed over completely. And that's what we think about The Prestige. No. The Prestige is a film about two magicians who are, so it's set on a path of rivalry and revenge after one of them accidentally kills the other one's wife in the course of performing a magic trick. And it follows them throughout their lives as they execute this professional rivalry on each other. It's adapted from a novel by a man named Christopher Priest, which I had read before the movie, by the way, and I might talk about some of that going forward. This is a warning, we'll be spoiling this film. We generally try to keep our reviews spoiler light, I would say. I mean, if you're just a complete spoiler freak, then maybe you don't like that, but
it's on Netflix right now. Watch it and then come back to this review.
Yes, we think that the film has been widely enough seen. It is widely enough available right now being on Netflix, and there are things that we would like to discuss that include the nature of things revealed in the film that we simply couldn't without spoiling it for you guys. If you haven't seen it, we encourage you to see it. If you hear the spoiler in this episode and you're like, well, now I know what the spoiler is, I don't need to see it. I will say to you that watching it last night, knowing everything that was going to happen, I enjoyed it at least as much, if not more, than I did when I first saw the film.
Yeah, this is a movie I see once a year because I forget just enough details to re-notice so many fun things. So it's one that you should go take a look at, even if it's been spoiled for you, even if you have seen it before. It's definitely worth your time.
Do you think that people, I guess since we're talking about the spoiler, I think that this is actually Christopher Nolan's, or was anyway for a while. I'm not sure if Interstellar booted it off the list, but for a while it was Christopher Nolan's lowest rated film on IMDb, on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, it was 76%, which is still pretty high for a lowest film, but that's Nolan being like always in the 90s with everything he touches.
I think this deserves to be in the 90s, but I'm wondering if people rated this low because they figured out the reveal before the reveal actually like really hit. Do you think that people felt cheated when they're like, well, I know what the trick is here. I figured it out. I'm a smart person.
I don't think so. I think a lot of people I've watched this with several people that thought it was just too long and too sad to be entertaining.
Oh, geez, really?
Yeah.
I think this is an amazing character study. And I mean, there's the really obvious interpretation of this, that this is about storytelling in general, right? I mean, Christopher Nolan goes on to make Inception, right? That's a movie about filmmaking, right? You have all the different characters in that representing different roles of filmmaking, of, set design and the director and the actor and the, like the casting agent, all these people representing different aspects of the filmmaking process, and then the audience, and how again, Inception's sort of this metaphor for making a movie. With The Prestige, it's a metaphor for storytelling, but that metaphor doesn't go like super, super deep. It's on the surface. You have the concept of the trick introduced with the 3-act structure, right? They have the pledge, the turn, and the prestige corresponding to both in regular storytelling and in this particular movie, the idea of the first, second, and third acts and how that your interpretation of the story evolves in much the same way that your sort of viewing of a magic trick would evolve as it goes on. But it
also kind of deconstructs the idea that some people have great story without good storytelling, like the difference between Angier and Borden's delivery style whenever they're doing magic.
That's very true. Man, that's something that I want to get into with the character. But I think that the movie is deeper than just sort of some fluffy metaphor. I mean, I love fluffy metaphor. I'm saying fluffy. I mean, most filmmakers don't even get anything that good in their movies. But if it was just a metaphor for storytelling and how that a story is constructed, that would be one thing. But the fact that these men both come off as so real and so human, and you just touched on it, right? The different approaches, where Angier is all about the performance, right? He's an amazing performer. He doesn't have great tricks. In fact, his only really great tricks are when he's ripping off Borden's tricks.
Or whenever Cutter's making him something. Like, I never saw him in this movie come up with an original trick of his own.
Right. He delivers other people's stuff, and even when Cutter made the thing, it was like, the birdcage is, that's cool, but it's just a disappearing birdcage. So what? But he's just mediocre at the actual construction of the trick, but his delivery and the reason he's doing the magic are so completely different from what Borden is. Borden is about the technical. He's about the creation and the art and about the commitment to what he's doing. And he sort of misses out on the, not that he's not a good performer, like he ends up being a pretty good, magician himself, especially when I love the moment when he pops out of the door in the transported man sequence and, pimps his own show out.
Yeah, he's got the duplicate hanging from the ceiling, like with the sign about him being at the Pantages Theater or whatever. Like, yes. It seems like that was whenever he actually started stealing a little bit from Angier, whenever he started getting the emotes, and it still felt a little bit forced on his end, but it was definitely a lot more of a performance than before.
Oh, definitely. Well, I mean, and you're on a stage too, right? You gotta play that stuff up. It's gotta be good for the guy in the back row, so you really gotta swing wide with the arms and everything. And he does a great job there, but generally that's not his shtick, right? His drive as a performer and as an artist is so completely different, and yet both of these guys do make amazing things. And it's tragic because of how bitter their rivalry gets.
Yeah, because you think of like a stage show or where they would have been working together for their whole lives, what they could have accomplished.
Yeah, and there's so many times when somebody could just give up, right? That you don't have to keep. They keep escalating this, and I get, on one hand, I get Angier's anger. It's like, you killed my wife, or at least I think you did. It's involved in an accident where she died anyway, and that's unforgivable. But by the time the movie's over, it's not even about revenge anymore. It's just morphed into pure obsessions. When he's talking to Olivia, Scarlett Johansson's character, and she says, something about his wife's death. He's like, I don't care about my wife's death. I care about a secret. And he's so dismissive and has become so cold at that point in his pursuit of this obsession. And I love how Olivia gets like both ends of that from both of these people. Like, on the one hand, his obsession is finding out Borden's secret. On the other hand, Borden, in keeping his secret, also becomes cold and sort of distant from life and pushes her away in the same way that Angier did. A lot of great stuff I noticed this time that I hadn't noticed before from the female actors' perspectives, where, I mean, they don't get a ton of screen time, but they're clearly the ones that are sort of experiencing the fallout from these two magicians, not being able to let go of their feud and move on.
And that kind of goes back to mirrored fates that happen between the women of this movie, or between various couples in the movie. You've got Olivia being screwed over by both the magicians. You've got Nooses playing in with Sarah and later in the movie with Borden. Then you've got Julia and the tank, and Hugh Jackman with the tank. There's a lot of weird symmetry that happens with that.
Yeah, it's set up so beautifully. And then, to get to the end and see what these men had done, and this is the part where we are going to get into spoilers, to see how much Borden had given up to keep his secret of, that he was a twin. My wife asked me as we were watching this movie, she said, well, so which one was it? And I was like, no, you don't understand. There wasn't, I mean, there may have, I'm sure that Christian Bale in playing the character probably had mannerisms that he picked for one side or the other, but in general, the movie, the whole premise of the story is that he swapped out constantly which one he was, and that he essentially gave up having a single identity purely for the sake of having this trick go well.
Yeah, each of them had like a half a life, and they said that was enough. And I kind of wondered if it would have worked better if they would have just let, like, if Fallon would have stayed Fallon, except when he was with Scarlett Johansson, and like the other one with his wife, because he obviously cared about her and his daughter.
But that would have tainted the trick. I think that people would have noticed at that point. They would have lost their edge.
Like, at that moment, it would have been a diverging of the personalities. Like, there would have been slow differences going between the two.
Well, that, and also just keeping the facts straight if they had to switch back for some reason. I mean, saying I don't remember you telling me that, like, from the other day is a lot different than not remembering something, the past 3 months or whatever because you haven't seen your wife. You got to keep that. I would assume that you have to sort of keep that cycle going to keep that kind of illusion up. I mean, she noticed, obviously, the wife knows when she doesn't understand that there has been a swap until later in the movie, but she understands that something is different about her husband sometimes.
Yeah, and the actress actually improvised a line that they used in the movie, like where she said, "I know what you are," and like she thought that was actually something that she shouldn't say because it would be too much of a revelation, but like she obviously knew that. Like, it was basically two personalities. Even if she didn't know it was a twin brother, she knew that there was something very, very wrong going on there.
I think she knew. I think she figured it out. I think that's what the whole argument was, because she's arguing with the brother that doesn't love her, and he's screaming. Well, knowing what the reveal is makes it a little bit easier, but to see that argument and to know that, sort of she's saying, I know that I've been living with two different people, and he's saying, like, hey, I'm not the one who loved you. What makes you think that it's been easy for me either to sit here and pretend like I care about this family when I don't? And I mean, again, she doesn't play really prominently, but to look at the movie from her perspective as this woman who, on one hand, has a loving husband who cares and provides for her, and then on the other hand has this guy who just, I'm not going to say can't stand her, but he doesn't care at all and would rather be off, doing his own thing and living his own life. And she has to live with both of those. And when she realizes, you got to think she's all of a sudden freaked out because of the physical aspect of the relationship. Like, who have I been having sex with all these times? Was it always just the one guy? I mean, that's something I wondered about.
Yeah, I'm betting it wasn't.
My gut tells me it probably was. Like, I think that the brothers would have had enough respect for each other to not cross that line. Even if there is although again, there's the whole, it depends on exactly how far they're willing to go for their trick. If they thought that they needed to have like that level of verisimilitude, maybe, but that would be just almost unforgivable to me. But even to have that sliver of doubt that maybe, there's these two men, especially, and they don't go, there's not a lot of sort of really Victorian sensibilities, but the idea of at the time that, it
was still like
two husbands.
It was still what, like 1899 or somewhere in that range.
I want to say, yeah, maybe a little later. I mean, Tesla's in Colorado at this point.
I think 1899 is whenever it opens and the wife dies.
Okay, yeah.
So like their career's moving from there.
So maybe not Victorian, but still like in the early 1900s, even today. If somebody found out, they've been accidentally living with two husbands, it might be a little bit of a scandal.
Yeah.
And so that is, there's just so much pathos there for what her character's going through. On the other hand, you have Angier, who's living his life of basically isolation, right? He hasn't even, I mean, he made Olivia, not made Olivia fall in love with him, but she fell in love with him, and he had a good thing there. He could have gone off and, I mean, been married to Scarlett Johansson, dude. Come on.
Yeah.
Could have been,
It's like,
good.
Just leave Christian Bale alone and have fun with Scarlett Johansson and all your money and all your magic, and you can do your own thing.
But no, he can't. He can't leave well enough alone. He sends her off to spy on Borden, and she is angry enough about that where she says, "You're going to send me to spy on him. I'm just going to tell him everything." And I love the sort of dueling journals aspect of this movie, the idea that these two guys are sort of playing each other as they read their journals back and forth, and how that plays into the time switch as well. It's so beautifully constructed, and how that you see the ending and then the beginning, and it never feels like, where am I at in the movie? It's always so smooth, and
that's a hard thing to pull off anytime you're using time jumps to make it actually feel smooth, especially with repeat beats like the journals.
Yeah. And well, in the mirror of the journals too, because you have, in both of the journals, you have the different magicians acknowledging each other, and it's a jaw-dropping moment both times. When Angier gets to the end of the journal and he's like, "Are you kidding me? This has been a setup the whole time." And then, you have that, but then Borden getting the end of his journal is like, "Well, how? No, it's not. That's not possible. You can't have been setting me up with this because he's dead." And yet, there we are. He's not dead. It's great beats on both of those, and the mirror aspect is amazing. I also, what do you think of the inclusion of Nikola Tesla in this story?
I think that it's awesome, but I also thought like David Bowie did a really good job with it.
Oh, he does. Him and Andy Serkis, by the way, is the assistant. Both of those guys.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's awesome seeing Andy Serkis in a role where he's not having to be hidden by costumes and things like that, because he is a genuinely good actor.
There's
For those of you that don't know, he plays Gollum and basically does a lot of voice work. And anytime there's a suit, there's a pretty good chance that it's him, or if it's a CGI suit anyway, because that's what his company actually does.
Also, him and this character both had problems with people guessing what was in their pocket.
Yeah. Gollum lost the ring because of it.
But I think that there's an interesting, I mean, if we're talking about this as a metaphor for storytelling, right? The fact that Angier goes to Tesla, and that's supposed to be a diversion, right? Like that, Tesla, as far as Borden would have known, didn't have any information for Angier. Like, he's just made a big Tesla coil that's going to throw some sparks, and it's going to be cool looking so that he can dress up his trick, because Borden needs something to dress up his trick. And yet, in this sort of random act, in this moment where it shouldn't have worked, Tesla still has something for Angier. He still is able to make this device that actually does work in a perverse and unexpected way. That, by the way, love. Maybe, I don't know if it's hard to quantify, but this might be my favorite opening shot of any movie once you've seen the movie and
just
know
the
what
hats
it all
on the
represents.
ground.
Yes, and the "Are you watching closely?" And it's just quiet. Like, you just get the couple of movie company logos, and then the panning shot of the hats with all the leaves falling on them, and it just says, "Are you watching closely?" I love that so much.
This has been my favorite Christopher Nolan movie for a while, even over Dark Knight and all that. Like, this is one that I'm sure we've talked about it before on the podcast, never like fully reviewed it, but this one is like one of probably my top 5 movies all time, if I really think about it. Like, it would have to be in there.
So here's a problem for me. I love this movie, and I like Christopher Nolan a lot. His reputation for me, not reputation, but my esteem of him as a filmmaker took kind of a hit after Interstellar. And I don't think that's fair. I'm fully admitting, whether or not some of you may love Interstellar, I came out of that feeling real flat. Not even just like, I didn't like the ending. I did have problems with the ending and some of the themes, but just in general, I wasn't excited by that. I didn't get drawn in, and maybe that's my fault, right? Maybe that's just a personal thing. But with this movie, again, even knowing how it ends, even knowing every twist and every turn, there's still that like, oh man, I like this guy's turning and moving and like the edits and the shots and the colors and everything, and the story is just all so compelling and impeccable that I'm sucked in every time. And I really, watching this movie, and we'll talk about the trailer for this next movie in a little bit, but it got me a little bit more excited for Dunkirk. I wasn't uber excited for Dunkirk after Interstellar, but now going back to Christopher Nolan's old stuff, and this one in particular, just it ramped me back up. I was like, you know what, this guy, he may not have done it with Interstellar, but he can do it right when he wants to do it right, and I'm definitely gonna be a little bit more hyped now for that movie.
Yeah, it's like even Tarantino makes a misstep every once in a while, so it's gonna be out there. Like it could have just been a story that got a little bit away from him. From like a writer's perspective, we've both had that happen before.
Yeah, definitely. Again, not a Christopher Nolan hater by any means. I don't love Interstellar at all, but I didn't. It just sort of. We talked about this last week a little bit with weird transition, but the Cars 3 trailer, like every time you have a crash, every time you have something that doesn't meet up to people's expectations, it hurts you a little bit. It chips away at your reputation. And that's what happened with Christopher Nolan. That was his big thing. I did get excited for it, and I went in and I was just sort of, yeah, okay. That was, like, it wasn't, I'm not saying it was a giant steaming pile of garbage. I just was not thrilled in any capacity by it. And that was disappointing. So, but that's not this movie. We haven't talked enough, and I want to hit this point as well. The story point about the clones. The idea that Angier's way of ripping off Borden's trick is to, well, honestly, it's to get away from magic entirely. Like he's spent his whole time claiming that he wasn't doing a magic trick, you know, as part of the performance. But here he gets to the end, and his solution is that, and it honestly fits in with his character, right? He's not a good magician. Magic was never a strong point, but man, can he sell an illusion or an effect like this. And here he does. He has this effect that he can do, and it's not a sleight of hand or anything like that. It's just pure, you know, Tesla magic science, but there's no trickery involved. And he makes that happen. And yet every single time, the thing for me that's like the hardest hitting about this movie is the moment where near the end of the movie where he's explaining to Borden what it was like to get into the machine every single night, knowing that he could be the double that drowned, and not, you know, not knowing which one he was going to be. And you see it in his performance too, right? Like he's presenting that, and Hugh Jackman, as he's presenting his machine, looks like he's walking the plank, because in a sense he is. You can tell, you can see it in his eyes that he's just horrified about what's about to happen.
And yet he has the fortitude to do it every single night for 100 nights. I'm sure that got cut a little bit short for the night whenever he actually, whenever Borden got caught down there in the basement trying to figure out the trick. But like, I guess one of the only problems I had with this movie is that he could have easily done it with just one clone and called it good.
You think?
Like, he didn't have to drown him every time. Like, he could have pulled a little bit of what Christian Bale was doing.
That's an interesting thought.
It wouldn't have worked for the murder plot, but it would have worked for just being able to do the trick and just have him be like up on the top of the stage to do like man's reach exceeds only his imagination type moment.
Well, that's an interesting point. Do you think so? Here, let's assume that he could have done that. All right, maybe there is something. Maybe what they're saying in the film is that there's something about Angier that isn't willing to allow for someone else in his life. Maybe his personality, and we don't get to see this, but there's something about creating a copy of himself that's so antithetical to his way of thinking that he just can't accept it.
Well, especially after he already had so many problems with his double from earlier.
That's a good point, like, right?
Would he have been able to share glory even if it's pretty much with himself?
I mean, there's a whole separate movie you could make about this copy problem, about which one is which and which one is real, and, you know, who has the agency. The interesting thing is, the first time he does the transport, the version of himself that's left behind is the one that does the killing, but later on, the one that gets left behind is the one that drops into the tank and dies.
Yep. So it's like a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy eventually.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. He's never after the first time he performs the trick, and he does that. By the way, he does it it's not just in front of a crowd. He does it like to just show somebody, hey, here's how you do the trick. Isn't that cool? Even there's a guy under the stage drowning as he's up there, and I think about that every time I watch this movie. The idea that every single time he performs that trick, the audience is laughing and clapping and applauding his, the double, the copy, as the whichever version of him is in the tank, is screaming and drowning, and hearing those muffled cheers as he, like, the life force drains out of him. It's just chilling.
As all the blind stagehands don't know what's happening because, like, they might be able to hear something, but they've only got, like, one person down there moving boxes, and that's all they know.
Yeah. I did love and it happens at the very beginning of the movie, too, and Christian Bale comes back there, and he's just got the act like you belong thing. He's like, no, I'm part of the act. Yeah. Chill, dude.
You can get away with a lot if you just look like you know what you're doing.
Well, and he does, right? He is a magician, so arguably he would know his way around the backstage pretty well.
Yeah.
But and he's done that kind of work before.
One of the other things I was wondering about with this, like the first time I saw it, I didn't realize that Borden had a twin. I thought that he just made the one copy of himself with Tesla. Like, I thought that was the entire thing. Like, I didn't realize that, like, there was a twin brother the first time I'd watched it. That was, like, probably in 2007 or something like that.
It doesn't line up with how the movie...
The timelines don't line up. But, like, I was wondering, like, at that point, like, why he would give away the Tesla thing and all this whenever he had made the copy and all that. Like, it was just a weird interpretation my brain did because it didn't pick up that he had a twin.
Well, I do also love the fact that Angier can't accept... Like... Cutter knows, like Michael Caine's character, like, the instant he sees the trick, he's like, he's got a double. Like, he doesn't know that it's a twin, but he doesn't need to. He's just like, listen, it's a real simple trick, dude. He has someone who looks like him who comes out of the box, and Angier cannot accept that. Like, he just can't, he can't believe that that's how it's done. He's so obsessed because the double is so perfect that he refuses to let go, and it's amazing that he and the audience both have the answer in front of them the whole time, and he's just like, no, it's got to be more complicated. It's got to be more complicated. And he makes it more complicated for himself. I mean, the fact, again, you mentioned the fact that he doesn't make a double and a copy and just use that. I think he needs things to be complicated. He needs it to be convoluted and weird, and the fact when it isn't, he can't understand it. The simplicity, it goes all the way back to one of the first scenes in the movie where they see the Chinaman, who's actually based on a real magician, by the way, who was not Chinese at all.
Yeah, he was just a white dude that, like, for the last 19 years of his life played as this character.
Yeah, never spoken English on the stage until the final day that he died, when he got shot doing the bullet catch trick, and he said, "My God, I've been shot," which is kind of, I don't know. I mean, that would be a memorable way to go out if you're gonna go. And they play reference to the whole idea that the bullet catch can be dangerous if some idiot puts something in the gun. But
man, that would have sucked for Borden and his brother, knowing that, like, as soon as he lost those fingers, they're gonna have to take his fingers off.
Yeah,
like the way they do it, where it's just like, drink the whiskey, get the chisel and a hammer, and just do it.
Not good. And the score's got a match, too. Let's not think about the mechanics of that too much. I don't want to... He wears gloves a lot, whatever.
Yeah, but it all fits in with, like, how immersed he has to be in that life. Like, this movie does such a good job of foreshadowing things. Like, we talked about watching it a second time and how much better it is. Like, from the very beginning, they're giving you all the hints you would need to figure this out if you're just paying close enough attention. And I don't know anyone that did figure it out before the reveal actually happened. They started to suspect some things, but it didn't quite make sense.
Well, I mean, from the very beginning of the journal, he says we were two young men wanting to make our mark in the world. And because you're watching Hugh Jackman and Christian Bale, you think, well, those are the two young men he's talking about. But in the context of that first journal entry, he could very easily just be talking about him and his twin brother.
Yep.
And there's the Chinaman with the bowl, going back to Angier needing things to be more complex than they are. That's a really stupidly simple trick once you know what the trick is. I mean, the execution is still complicated, but it's not about the fact that the trick is impossible to conceive of. It's just the fact that you have to build your entire life around the trick. And the fact that Borden sees it immediately is because he's built his entire life around a trick that he hasn't even done yet. He's so calculating and so, I don't want to say cold because he's not cold, but he's so willing to commit to his art that he conceives of this trick, I would assume at a somewhat young age, like way before he's met any of these people, builds these alternate personas and goes into this world to build this reputation up purely so he can do this trick that he's spent his entire life setting up. It's an insane dedication to his art, and probably not a good one, by the way. I don't think that it worked. I don't think it was worth it in the end for either of them. Obsession with your art is good to a point, but like there's other stuff, guys.
Yeah. What was the movie we saw? The Bollywood one where the brothers
Doom 3.
Yeah, Doom 3. Doom.
Machale. Great movie, by the way.
Yeah, after watching that and going back to this one, I kept thinking about like how one of the brothers could have either gotten the short end or they shared a life like this, and it was kind of interesting looking back at that movie at that. It's not the first time we've had like the whole twins buried into the plot type thing.
I'm pretty sure Doom came out after this one, so probably it sort of ripped off the idea, but it also does a little bit different with it, where the two twins are not like one of the twins is a little bit slow mentally, or at least different.
And it's also a full-on action movie, not like drama and intrigue.
Yes. That's not on Netflix anymore, Tony. It's sad. I want to watch it again. There's some good Bollywood action on Netflix, though. I do want to mention, just briefly, because I know we're kind of getting on in the episode, I've read the book that this is based on. This is one of those rare cases where the movie is better than the book. The book is not bad. It's pretty okay. But the movie takes what is there in the book and really puts a different spin on it. The duplication machine works almost not completely differently, but it's like the copy that's left behind is kind of just a frozen statue of a person. And so you don't have the whole pathos of like somebody dying each time the trick is done. The way they set up like the beginning, it's instead of Borden trying to get Angier out of the tank, it's Borden turning the machine off mid-trick. So you have like, then there are two halves of him, but like one of them is just like almost like a ghost because the machine didn't get to finish, and the other half is partly messed up, and the ghost like transports itself into the body of the full one once the full version of Angier dies. It's a weird, like, it's not as elegant as this. I guess I spoiled the book for you guys too, but I'm sorry.
Lots of spoilers. It was interesting that the writer of this book was like, I'm only going to sell the rights if you give me Christopher Nolan. That's probably a pretty good claim for if you want to make money off of a movie.
I read that he didn't know Christopher Nolan. Like, he was originally going to give it to, I think, De Palma?
No, like what I was reading is that he had offers from other directors, and he wanted it to go to him because Memento and because of one of his other films.
No, Sam Mendes. Sam Mendes, okay, I'm reading this off of IMDb's trivia page. Wanted to do the film as a follow-up to American Beauty, which have just been nominated for 7 Academy Awards. Another offer came from Newmarket Films on behalf of Nolan, of whom Christopher Priest had never heard.
So I misread.
Priest was prepared to close the deal with Mendes when a VHS copy of Nolan's Following was delivered to his house by motorbike. Memento is still in post-production. Priest was impressed and chose Nolan in part to support a new filmmaker over an established one.
I was mistaken.
I mean, good choice on his part, though. I mean, he did pick. He did have the option to go one way or the other and did pick Nolan, and I think made a pretty good choice.
Yeah. Who was the screenwriter and adapter for this? It was Jonathan Nolan, Christopher Nolan. So like the kind of the standard Nolan brothers type thing. For them to make that many drastic changes and actually enhance a story is pretty impressive. Because so often whenever a director just grabs a hold of a book, they're cutting and cutting and cutting, and then like the things that they make changes for just really aren't as good.
Yeah, it's tough. But I mean, and I'm not saying the book is bad, but I think that so there is a great element in the book of these two guys. Essentially, it's two different journals, right? You read one journal first, and then you read the next journal, and it's each of the magician viewing the other through their own eyes. So both stories have the other magician as the villain, which is a cool literary device. And it kind of, the way it kind of wraps up, and there's like a whole idea of the descendants of these guys being alive in present day and the machines still being around and stuff. Like, all of that stuff is interesting. They took the good stuff out of this book. The idea of these two magicians and their differing point of view and elevated it into something more. It's not like the book is bad, although some of the elements I described are kind of wonky, especially compared to the film, but it's just not the same. And they knew what to keep and what to change, and it's awesome.
And the last plot point that bothered me a little bit is if Tesla had this machine, couldn't he have just gotten like a few gold ingots or something and just cloned the crap out of them for a little bit and never had funding problems again?
Now you're getting into... Yeah, he could have. I do like, though, that he's pretty terrified of the machine. He leaves it because, Angier gave him a lot of money, but he's also like, you shouldn't use this. This is a bad idea. I'm going to leave this for you because I took all your money, but no, you need to leave it.
Also, Colorado Springs is very, very mountainous, but it's also like right on the plains going into the mountains. They actually filmed this in Marble, Colorado. It's a lot more rocky than that and a lot more imposing looking. Marble's a really pretty area. I bet you can't guess what they produce there.
What do they produce there? Marble?
Yep.
Nice.
Anyway. But yeah, that was, it's always cool seeing that.
Apparently
like,
I could not guess. You mentioned we got some questions about this movie, Tony?
We did. The first question comes from Dan Malinsky, at Mandalinsky on Twitter. Figure that one out. Do you think that Angier does clone himself, or is that the trick itself, making the audience believe that a cloning machine actually exists? I think there's enough evidence that he actually did clone himself, especially because there are so many bodies and things being moved out of the place. Like, you can see just all of them, like all the tanks.
Yeah, the movie's very explicit that that's actually what he's doing. You see two of them in one shot, and he shoots himself. You see the guy in the tank at the end who's
the closing shot is
which is again the gut punch that sort of brings in all of the terrible stuff that we mentioned earlier about him being drowning there under the stage.
Can you imagine how nasty some of those tanks would be after like months?
Yeah. Ashley was also asking about like why didn't they empty the tank out and bury the Yeah, he has to buy a new tank. You think that the guy who makes
then the blind people would know they were handling a body.
Well, Angier could do it.
Yeah, that's true.
I guess he doesn't want to get his hands dirty, but he has to buy a new tank for every show.
Yeah, that's a lot of expensive tanks.
Yeah, that glass is heavy. But no, he's definitely within the context of the story, he's definitely teleporting himself. That's 100% what's happening.
Yeah.
If you question that, like, the movie just sort of, I don't know where you're coming from, Dan Malinsky, whatever. Point being, no, that would ruin the movie if he was not actually teleporting himself.
Next question comes from Doc Occupant, at Doc Occupant, and that's David Webb. If you were to get Tesla's attention, what would you have him build for you?
Are we just, within the realm of scientific possibility? Like, this isn't real, guys. Are we just assuming that Tesla's a genie? Because, say
the internet's idea of who Tesla is real. Because, like, the real Tesla and the internet's idea are a little bit deviated. There's a little bit of legend behind him. Like, he's still absolutely incredible, one of the most incredible minds that's ever lived. But he's also not quite the wizard that people like to push him up as, like, online. So, let's go with the online version. Do you want the death ray?
Yeah, or his idea of wireless power transmission. He wanted to do that. It's true. He was trying to do it, and we understand the principles that he was working with now, and we know that it wasn't possible. He didn't know that it wasn't possible. He was trying it. It's fine that he was trying it. But just the fact that he thought it was possible and he was a real smart guy doesn't mean that we've had this wireless power transmission being suppressed now because the government hates everybody or something.
It's like it's
That's
just plausible enough to make sense because people hate the power companies and they're like, yeah, think about it. They would just be gone overnight.
yeah. Well, somebody's still got to produce the power.
Yeah.
Somebody's got to be sitting there with the power plant making the power to go out into the not wires.
I more wonder what a mind like that could do with like modern modeling with like a team of people. Like you look at what Taylor Wilson, like the boy who plays with Fusion, is able to do just out of stuff in his backyard and the cumulative knowledge that he was able to pull out of textbooks and online and everywhere else. Like what could Tesla do if he was standing on the shoulders of like the nuclear age? Like that's what I'm more interested in.
Well, that's an interesting question, but then you think about the fact that we are in this age means that there are more minds like Tesla. We have people who are very smart and very educated in solving incredibly difficult problems. And it's not just, there's sort of, at the time, there was the single man inventor theory, and now we have, corporations, which I know people don't like to think about corporations as being but I mean, there's not like one guy inventing very much stuff anymore.
Yeah, can't have one guy build the iPhone. You can't have one guy, like we talked about this a long time ago. There's not one person that can figure out start to finish how to make a wireless mouse.
Yeah.
It's a huge cumulative effort between thousands and thousands of focused people creating incredible products. It's not the Tony Stark style thing.
Tesla's interesting too because he has he has mental problems. Like his problems allow him to visualize things in a way that other people can't. So he kind of has AutoCAD in his head before anybody else does. But if you like Tesla with AutoCAD in his head versus somebody with AutoCAD in their computer, do the benefits of having it in your head outweigh the problems of not being able to stand being around women with earrings? Because the guy with it in his computer can probably stand to be around women with earrings, and Tesla can't.
Yeah. I mean, I still feel that if you were to put him in a situation where he had the resources of today, like that sort of mind could do amazing things though. So like he would have the benefit of his own like kind of mental prowess along with all the models, all the resources of the current age. So I think that it would I'm sure there's people out there, but I don't know if anyone that's out there right now is actually like on the level of Tesla. Like as far as being able to understand concepts that were barely researched at the time with magnetic fields and everything else. But now we know so much more about them, so there might not need to be that. So it's an interesting
thought.
There's
the fact that the heroes of our time are leaders now, not inventors, right? You have Steve Jobs, who did not invent much of anything, but man, was he able to get people together and tell them what to make in a way that was successful. Bill Gates to a certain similar extent, building up his empire. Elon Musk from today. I'm not saying Elon Musk is not a smart guy, but Elon Musk is not sitting at a drawing table inventing the rocket that's going to go up for SpaceX or building. Again, he might be getting his hands dirty and adding input, but he has a team. He's the guy who's telling other people, hey, what about this? And what if we tried this? And people bring things to him and he says yes or no. And great leaders are now taking the place of the sort of individual mind.
Yeah, it's the idea of people with great imagination being able to manifest their ideas through the work of others, like by just giving the resources, time, and everything to these people that have the know-how.
That's kind of a heavy, long-winded answer to, I don't know what I would have Tesla built for me. I guess I'll take a death ray, thank you. And some free wireless power transmission for my phone. Can I just get it to charge anywhere in my house? That'd be amazing.
Yeah, because I've got like the little wireless charger. It's actually right here. Like it's not plugged in right now. But I use that all the time. It's nice to be able to just grab my phone and then put it back on while it's charging. But it's like, yeah, it's not really that much of an improvement over me having to plug something in versus me having to put it on a 3-inch platform. Yeah. Like it's nice, it's quick, but it's not quite the same as wireless energy.
If the cloning thing is available, I will take a small scale version of that and do the dollar bill thing.
Yeah, just save up for 1 ounce of gold and then just put a bunch of gold in there and do the whole multiply, have it square each time and then just be done.
And then there's the whole question of what that does to the world's economy. This is getting to be way too much of a deep dive.
Yeah, you gotta the thing about it is you just got enough, or you got to do enough to be independently wealthy without raising enough questions. What's the book? It's not Ready Player One. It's another video game style book where a guy realizes that he's in a simulation and starts exploiting it. And almost everybody ends up at this time period because they Googled, like, what's the best time in the past to live. And they live as wizards because they can actually change the world's programming. Did you ever read that one? It's got
no,
like,
it sounds like a Scott Adams book, though.
Scott Meyer, I think, did this one.
Okay.
Was it Scott Adams? Let me look.
Scott Adams wrote one that sounds similar to that. But, yeah, there's the $1 Million Duck as well, where the duck lays the golden eggs. That's a similar take on the concept where they're going around like trying to pawn off the gold egg yolks to people.
Scott Meyer,
not a great
off to be a wizard is the name of the book, or Off to Be the Wizard, and how like all these guys end up screwing up because they get a little too greedy too quickly, and instead of like using it to build a business or anything, they just fill their bank account with millions of dollars and then like panic and go to the past. It's fun. It was a good book.
Oh, that is fascinating. The Amazon cover for Off to Be the Wizard is a GIF.
Is it?
Yeah, it plays. I've never seen that. Also, you're right. It's Scott Meyer.
Yeah.
Okay. Did we have other questions, Tony?
Let me run through. There's a lot of tweets that came through, but I think a lot of it's talking about the flat Earth.
We definitely have to get into talking about the Hellboy reboot. If we run out of time for trailer talk, we'll just talk about the Dark Tower.
All right. Chris Becker asks, "What's the best magic trick you've ever seen?"
Man, I haven't seen a lot of magic. I'm trying to think of. I've seen some good ones, but it's been a while since I've watched magic. I enjoy like a good magic trick here and there. But I can't remember which one would be the one that would be the best. Have you had experience with magic tricks, Tony?
I think the best set of magic tricks was actually just like a singular show that I saw from a street performer in Boulder, Colorado. Like, this guy's been out there most of the times I've gone, and he's like, you can tell people are just dropping cash on him. He's probably doing 3 shows a day just in like open air, like I think it's 16th Street Mall, or no, it's Pearl Street Mall. And he's just doing this every time I go out there, and he's hustling. And he's got like all these like sleight of hand tricks, but he's also got a lot of the whole like putting things in people's pockets when they don't notice, and like a lot of really cool card tricks. And then there's just like feats of things that he's able to do because he's practiced them. Like he constantly from one street corner will throw a playing card from just a street corner over the street to the top of a 3-story building. Just
That's
stuff like
impressive.
that. Yeah, it's like it's not like true magic. It's just he's really good at what he does. He knows how to sell it, and it's a lot of fun to watch.
Wait, you're saying this guy's not doing real magic?
Well, I mean, maybe. He's got an enchanted card deck, maybe, you know.
Pass.
But it's like he's very good at what he does, and I'm trying to think of like a particular trick. I saw one whenever I was in Vegas as a kid that had some really cool stuff. It was like the arrow passing through the assistant, and that later got spoiled for me by a Fox series about like about how magic tricks are done. I don't know if anybody else saw that, but the magician was tired of seeing the same old tricks all the time, so he just got a show on Fox to reveal every wizard or every magician's tricks.
I remember that.
Yeah, showing how the mirrors
The
can
masked
hide
magician.
Elements. Yeah.
Right, they played up a big deal about like there was one trick where they're like, if he's still in the box, they're going to unmask him. It's like, oh, I'm so nervous about your pre-recorded show. The magician won't be able to get out. It's still cool stuff though.
It's hard to localize like one magic trick that's awesome. I really want to see like a Penn and Teller show someday just because like they seem pretty awesome. So I don't know. It's hard to localize the one. It's more just I've seen some cool magic shows.
I want to. This is not a trick that I saw, but it is related to our movie. In the movie, Christian Bale's character it goes by the stage name The Professor, and that is a reference to a real life magician named Di Vernon, who was at least from modern perspective, one of the greatest card handlers of all time. And I read a book about him a while back called The Magician and the Card Sharp. And one of the things that he would do was he knew this one tailor in New York that made like clothes for a lot of high-end guys. And I think it was Di Vernon who did this. He would go to this tailor. He would sew cards, like this one card in particular, into the like into the lining. He would pay them to sew this card into the lining of all of these suits. And if he saw somebody wearing one of those suits, he would do a card trick where he palmed that particular card out of the deck or whatever and made them choose that, and then be like, "Excuse me, it's sewed in the lining of your suit," which is just like bonkers. Again, there's sort of
like
that
a long con.
the fact that you would know ahead of time, like, I'm gonna be doing this trick. It plays into the whole thing of what we mentioned with the this movie about living your magic, and that guy definitely was working hard at his craft. And he goes, the great thing is the book is all about how he hears this one guy has figured out how to do this one particular card trick, and he's using it to cheat at cards. And he like searches for him in this like river gambling town, trying to find this one obscure card sharp who knows this trick and get him to teach it to him, because like he can't figure out how to do it. And this guy's like, "Oh, here's how you do it." It's incredible. Great stuff.
Yeah. With that, I think we are probably done with the prestige, and we're moving on to trailer talk.
Trailer talk. Talking about, in case we don't have time for anything else, Tony, the trailer that I've been the most weirdly obsessed over, and I
Tell
can't.
us what it is.
It's The Dark Tower. I can't sit here and tell you it's like the best trailer ever, or even that I think it's going to be the best movie ever. But for some reason, I was very intrigued by this trailer. I was very excited. I was reading like all of the shot-by-shot breakdowns and reading people's reactions and being sad when people didn't love it, even though I didn't love it. I'm not even a big Dark Tower fan. Like, yeah. You've read the books, Tony.
I've read all the books, and like I love the series. Like, even if it got a little bit weird towards the end, like the thing that concerns me is that it does not feel like the Gunslinger. Like as far as the first book, and I can probably forgive that whenever I see it in action. I just expected this to be like Roland in the desert, like the Man in Black fled across the desert and the Gunslinger followed. I expected to see more of that, less of the whole like contemporary New York. So, like, I'm a little confused as to where they're going with it and what the plan is here.
I can tell you what the plan is. So I've been following the production of this film sort of just as I follow movie news in general. And I know that they've talked about the fact that they're sort of combining elements from the first, like, 3 or 4 books into this one story, which could be fine and could be, like, really troubling if they do it wrong. But they're trying to sort of jumpstart a little bit with the series and moving forward with the plot. This is not the Gunslinger, okay? This is the Dark Tower Part 1 or whatever. They're not, like, this is not a direct adaptation of the first book. They're kind of adapting the whole series, and this is a cycle in the Gunslingers.
It's like the anti-Hobbit, basically. Like, they're just going like with 3 books instead of making 1 into 3.
I think so, yes.
Okay.
I think also, so there's a concept in the Dark Tower series that he's sort of lived this before, and the idea of the movies is that this is yet another cycle of his life that he's living. They're not adapting the books, they're adapting the idea of the books and saying, okay, well, all these elements recombine in a different way, and now he still has the Horn of Eld and lots of stuff like that changing and coming at it in a slightly different way. It's difficult to know whether the movie's going to be great, but I love the trailer. Yeah. I love the imagery of the trailer, the weird sort of, I hope that there's not a heavy amount of New York stuff. I'm fine with him being in our world a little bit, but I don't want, like Beastmaster 2 style Gunslinger. They don't need to, or the Smurfs movie, like, oh, we're now in the real world from our fantasy place. No, please not. But
and who knows if this is actually going to be New York the whole time. They go into a lot of different cities, like after the plane, the train, and all that sort of stuff. There's a lot of different places where they could be. But it looked like New York for a lot of it. And some of that does take place there, especially whenever he's drawing Eddie or people like that. So it can happen. It's just like I'm worried that that's going to be the entire thing of the movie because they didn't have a big enough budget for it. I did like that they were showing his like creepy fast reloads and things like that like always mess with people's heads. And Idris Elba as Roland in action has pretty incredible presence on the screen. So like,
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with him. I saw a lot of comments in the YouTube like, I'm not a racist, but that ain't Roland. It's like,
I mean,
I'm glad you're not a racist, dude.
I fully understand where they're coming from for that, because like I pretty much imagine like a Clint Eastwood type character, and he's pretty explicitly said to be white, but
yeah,
it's Idris Elba.
I think that like other aspects of race actually do play in later books where it matters. It
matters more that Susanna is being recast as a young, pretty white girl to me. Whenever like a big part of her character was not trusting white men, and that's why she hated Roland so much.
Is she being recast? That I had not heard. Now you might be on.
Well, there was someone named Susanna on the IMDb page that is like, looks like to be early 20s white girl. Whenever it was supposed to be like 30s, like Odetta versus Detta, who turns in. Oh, I can't get too much into the spoilers of that, but like she's like they took the black handicapped lady and turned her into a white girl.
I would well until we see it, I would.
I'm gonna reserve
be cautious
judgments.
about believing IMDb about like anything.
Yeah,
because they don't know. Like I'd say probably half the people editing this page know nothing about the movie.
Yeah.
Also, I don't see that in create a character page for Susan Delgado. No, I won't. Thank you.
Yeah, this is saying that Susan Delgado is being played by Alex McGregor.
I'm looking for it.
Like, this is just on IMDb.
Oh, here it is.
She is from South Africa, I guess. But she is rather light.
Let's not get into this conversation.
I'm just
She's
saying.
Definitely not old. We can agree on that.
Yeah. I'm just saying that feels like they're just doing, like, that might be the counter to the race swapping of Roland. I don't know what their plan is there. I don't even know if she's actually been cast for that, so we'll see.
Fair enough. Speaking of potentially bad news in movies, and I guess I'm getting away from this trailer. I don't even know what it is I love about it. Like, it's so corny and cliche, right? Like, there's a lot of lines like, oh, he's not the devil, he's worse. And, you're a gunslinger, aren't you? They're all dead now. Which I saw somebody complaining that, no, Roland would have totally said I'm a gunslinger because that was his whole deal, that he was the last one.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of lines that seem like they could be cringy, but I've suckered in by this stupid fantasy Western stuff. I want to see him fast reload his gun. I love every single time he does that. The time where he's like, sort of just swipes his hand across his belt and all the bullets are in the gun now, that's awesome. The time he's like spinning the cymbal, all the bullets are in the gun, that's awesome. The time where he throws the bullets up in the air and scoops them into the gun, that's awesome. I don't know why the Man in Black has force powers. I didn't read anything beyond the first book. It got too weird for me.
Like, he was able to do some power stuff. It was less like overt magic, like in front of people, than it was kind of being in the background influencing everything. So,
yeah.
But like I for a visual medium, you might need a little bit more of that. And he occasionally was able to pull out some wizard-like powers.
Well, there's something great about the book that's like, you can feel Stephen King kind of figuring things out. Like, at the beginning, that opening line, the Man in Black fled and the gunslinger followed, and you're like, okay, well, this could be anything. And it kind of gets into this weird, like, post-fantasy thing. And then by the end of it, when the Man in Black just sits down and spends 3 pages sort of, like, talking about how amazing he is and how the tower is going to fall and all this other stuff, or maybe it's not going to fall, I forget. Anyway, You're like, you've moved into some weird, like, spiritual realm where he's, like, literally Satan taunting Roland, who relives this over and over, and it's become something completely different. And by the time you get to the second book, you're just in more standard Stephen King territory, which I like standard Stephen King, but it didn't match the tone of the first one to the point where I just wasn't able to. I've not finished the drawing of 3.
I think it starts feeling back in that whenever he gets to the Wastelands and with Wizard and Glass, because he's still trying to figure out what the hell he's going to do for the series. So he gets back to the kind of feeling it out and creating this world partially on the fly, which some people don't like. But it drawing of the 3 was actually my favorite of the series, and it's like the one that caused you to quit. So.
I mean, and it's not like a rage quit. It just kind of got bored with the whole, like, how do I get out of this airplane with this guy who has drugs in his gut? And I just didn't. So,
yeah.
I didn't care about the guy with the drugs. Joseph explained that, well, yeah, he needs the penicillin and he's sick in his world, and it just.
Yeah, because the lobstrosity ate him, or part of him, so on.
I didn't.
We're getting into way too many spoilers.
That's the first part of drawing of the 3. I don't think.
Yeah, but that's like the second book.
It's fine. Okay. Speaking of things people think are bad movie ideas, we do also need to touch on the Hellboy reboot.
The rated R, like gritty reboot of Hellboy.
Yeah. Are you how are you feeling about this, Tony?
I'm always a proponent of making more movies more violent, more dark, more everything. So on the surface, I could be okay with it if it makes it a little bit more like the comic books. Even though the second one felt a lot like the comic books. It really did. But the thing is, with fantasy violence, you can always get away with more. Because, like, you're not rending a person in half, you're rending a CGI model or, like, a giant tree thing or things like that. So you can have, like, full-on cinematic violence. And, like, the language isn't a big deal for me. Like, I like it whenever it doesn't feel like people are, like, forcing language to be all soft. Like, whenever they say poop instead of shit or something like that. Like, that kind of stuff feels weird. Like, they did a little bit of that in Guardians of the Galaxy on my last watch through. I still haven't seen the second one. Don't say anything.
It's good.
Okay. That's okay to say.
I really, really enjoyed it.
I just thought you were going to be like, man, I couldn't believe whenever blah, blah, blah died. No. But.
Well, I couldn't, but.
But yeah, like with, I'm okay with the concept because I want to see him actually finish like a good story arc for Hellboy. But the thing is, Ron Perlman was a great Hellboy. Like he was awesome.
But he's getting older.
Yeah.
Right?
He can't fill out the suit like he used to. He used to be a big, thicker guy. Now he's kind of getting smaller. He was good in Moonwalkers, but like, there's only so much you can do whenever you're getting like, he's got to be in his like mid 60s.
I think it's late 60s.
Yeah, might even be later. So I'm gonna check that. But I could see it being interesting. But I also liked the Guillermo del Toro feel of it. Like that was just like.
I don't think nobody's gonna throw away the Guillermo del Toro films. We can still have those and have awesome Hellboy films from that. I think. I think it's a good idea because they're never going to make Hellboy 3, right? Yeah. From Guillermo del Toro. Like, he wanted too much money, and the movies didn't make enough money for them to be able to justify doing that. Now, if I find out that they're rebooting this and they're giving, the reboot like $200 million when Guillermo del Toro only wanted $150 million to make his Hellboy 3, then I'm going to be kind of annoyed. But if they're just saying like, hey, Neil Marshall, you make good stuff with Game of Thrones on a TV budget, a big TV budget, but still like, make that work. We got David Harbour. I could see David Harbour as Hellboy, especially in all the makeup from the guy from Stranger Things. And I don't hate this idea on the surface. I think we can have 2 awesome Hellboys, and nothing's gonna. I mean, something eventually will happen to Ron Perlman, but like nobody's taking away from the awesomeness of Ron Perlman. If they make a crappy one, we haven't lost anything. It's just.
And we've got a decent shot at actually gaining something.
Yeah, I think Neil Marshall could do something cool. He doesn't have a giant presence like Guillermo del Toro, but I mean his work, he did The Descent, and he's done work on Game of Thrones.
I did a 5 facts on The Descent. That's actually a really solid movie, especially if you're claustrophobic. Ooh, that's a rough one.
Yeah, he's no slouch. And David Harbour, from what I've seen in Stranger Things, is a fine actor, so I can't just hate on this based on nothing but the concept, Tony. I know people don't like people to reboot their darlings, but one of the trailers we didn't talk about was Blade Runner 2049, and that's looking pretty good.
Yeah, it is. And that's not a reboot. That's a direct sequel.
It's one of those, like, Force Awakens things where they're, like, you're making it for the modern audience, but it's also a sequel.
Yeah, where it's the Fast and the Furious 4 soft reboot style.
Yeah, kinda. Fast and Furious 4 was just... That wasn't even a reboot. I'm talking, like... If you're going back to an older series, like the Star Trek ones, right? And maybe not quite as blatant as the Star Trek ones, but where they're like, this still is kind of in continuity with the old Star Trek movies, and we have some, we have Leonard Nimoy, but it's also a reboot at the same time. It's not quite that blatant, but it's sort of in that universe of, not pre-boots, I don't know what you want to call it, but where they're sort of, you can watch 2049 Blade Runner and not have to be like, I need to go study the lore of Blade Runner, I think. Really interesting looking story, by the way, on that movie. I'm really excited for them to dig into the whole like metaphorical race divide between the humans and the androids, and sort of hopefully they'll have something to say about the kind of stuff that's happening today. I think that could be very cool.
Yeah, could be interesting.
But we are out of interesting things to say right now. So we want you to go to humanechoes.com and click on the Become a Member link, because that is how we get your money. And
we
you
get all of it. No, we get
awesome stuff.
$2, $5, $10, $20. There's a lot of really cool stuff you get at various tiers. The bonus podcast, which is our favorite thing to make, you've got 40 some episodes backlogged to that, so you get a bunch of content instantly. There's a lot of really cool stuff that happens in the bonus podcast. You also get pins whenever you hit that $10 level, which we just sent out the Dirt Block pin. A lot of really cool stuff going on there. We're also talking about possibly making some rewards if you can refer a member. We're trying to work the details out there, but we might come up with a pin that you can only get if you refer somebody else to becoming a member. So more information on that coming soon.
Also, early access to things like Kerbal Space Program and Dwarf Fortress Let's Plays. So check that out. It's awesome, and you're awesome. And next week, we will be talking about The Eyes of My Mother. Yes, we know we should have done that this week for Mother's Day. We didn't realize it until just now, but here we are. That's what we're talking about. It's on Netflix, as was this movie. And yeah, I don't almost nothing about it. Tony was excited about this one. I think I've seen the trailer, but it's been a while.
Yeah, this one is probably going to be pretty hyper-violent, pretty gross in a lot of ways. I was recommended this by a friend of mine who I trust with kind of indie horror movies. So we're going to go with that.
Hyper-violent and pretty gross, says Tony Southcott.
Yeah.
Pull quote. Haven't even seen the movie yet.
Put that on the cover, damn it. I'm actually I'm on the cover of this Control-Alt-Delete movie. Or at least on the front page of their website for something I said about it in a review from the Silver Scream Fest. We need to start being on more covers like that.
I thought you were just like, they had stolen your picture.
No, just like flat out me, just like grinning or whatever.
Hey, it's me, Tony Southcott.
Totally. Whenever you're trying to sell a movie, you put my face on it. That's totally going to work.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week. Have a good one.
Bye.